Hello and welcome. You're watching India First with me, Akshita Nandagopal. In the last 24 hours, we've seen an absolute meltdown by Trump and his team, each heaving and hawing about India. The latest, Donald Trump calling trade with India one-sided. Trump says India tried to reduce tariffs, but it was too late, according to him. And then, of course, you have the man we all know now, the headline grabber in India, Washington's India beta-in-chief, Navarro, with his non-stop, senseless, zero fact-based attacks on India. But are we really surprised? The timing, of course, is crucial here. Why have we seen this playing out in the last 24 hours? These taunts, barbs flying in thick and fast since the Tianjin Troika photo op. With Modi-Putin-Xi's candid chat at the SCO becoming not just the talk of the town, but the talk of the world, is Trump realizing his punish India strategy isn't actually working, and that in fact, it's had the exact opposite impact of creating a new world order, at least talk of it. Here's a glimpse of what to expect in this edition of India First.
Pacific power play rattles Trump. Unity in Tianjin, unease in US. Troubled Trump justifies tariff.
It was a shame to see Modi getting in bed as the leader of the biggest democracy in the world with the two biggest authoritarian dictators in the world, in Putin and Xi Jinping. That doesn't make any sense.
Tianjin Troika turned tables on Trump tariff. The big focus on India First.
All right, we've got lined up for you a very, very interesting analysis on what's really playing out, what's America's game plan, and the constant rants against India by Team Trump. That much more coming your way. Let's begin with the headlines. Yamuna River crosses danger mark in Delhi. Water enters several low-lying areas along its banks, forcing people to move to safer places. India Today reports from Delhi's flooded zones.
Evacuating at this point in time, of course, the warnings have been sounded already, but a lot of people didn't realize that the water level will increase to the extent that a lot of things will get damaged within their homes. They're doing what they can right now to save whatever is there inside the house.
Big win for Maratha quota protesters in Mumbai. Maratha community gets Kunbi status for reservation under the OBC category. Manoj Jarange Patil gets emotional, finally ends his hunger strike. No bail for Sharjeel Imam and Umar Khalid in connection with the 2020 Delhi riots case. Prosecution strongly opposes. Delhi High Court says can't permit conspiratorial violence under the garb of protests. Prime Minister Modi slams the abuse of his mother, gets rather emotional, calling it an insult to every mother in the country. Prime Minister demands apology from RJD and Congress. The NDA calls for Bihar Bandh on 4th September.
गाली, भद्दी गाली केवल मेरी मां को नहीं दी गई है। ये भद्दी भद्दी गाली करोड़ों माताओं बहनों को दी गई।
First made in India chips unveiled by Prime Minister Modi. Big Atmanirbhar pitch in semiconductor and critical minerals. Let's begin with images coming in from China, gearing up for that massive military parade tomorrow. You've got North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arriving in Beijing with his daughter to attend China's grand military parade. And some of those pictures of Kim Jong-un arriving in an armored train going viral. Those are the pictures, audio screens from the moment when Kim Jong-un actually touched down in Chinese soil. This is going to be a big military parade which China claims will showcase their nuclear missiles and military strength. But one of the big headlines that will emerge is again about the messaging. Days after the SCO summit, you're again going to see a powerful display of unity because Beijing, of course, with Xi Jinping there, they've invited several world leaders. Vladimir Putin, Russian president, is going to be there. And then, of course, you have Kim Jong-un as well. So this new Troika also will be seated together for that military parade. These are images of Kim Jong-un on the right of your screens, accompanied by his daughter during the visit. Let me just quickly bring in Pranay Upadhyay of India Today Global on this. Pranay, what do you think is the messaging really involved here of having Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping all together at this military parade?
Indeed, Akshita, if you see, this is going to be a military might, exhibition by China. And if you see the last few days of China's global activities, on one side, China hosted the biggest SCO summit in Tianjin, and now they will be hosting the biggest military parade in Beijing on Tiananmen Square, which will be attended by not only Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, but also the Russian President Vladimir Putin, as well as the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and along with him, around 26 world leaders. So this is an exhibition of strength by China to show that they are the alternative pole for the world, and they want to show their strength, their might, how they are rallying the support of various countries. And obviously, an interesting thing has also happened that the Pakistani Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir has also traveled to Beijing, and he will also be attending this military parade. President Xi Jinping has started the tradition of holding this military exhibition, this military parade in Beijing, in Tiananmen Square. They celebrated the 70th anniversary in 2015, and now after 10 years, this will be the biggest show of might by China tomorrow on 3rd of September. The parade will start at around 6:30 a.m. India time.
Okay. All right, Pranay. Thanks for that update. Over to our top focus here on India First. It's been quite amusing to see America's reaction to the Tianjin hugs and handshake, and particularly that impromptu candid moment of Prime Minister Modi with President Putin and President Xi Jinping. The American media outlets can't stop talking about it, and even the staunchest Trump supporters today are questioning if Trump, with his tariff tyranny, has actually scored a self-goal and has set in motion the formation of a new global order, one in which the West just doesn't figure. In geopolitics, in diplomacy, appearances are important. So to see Modi, Xi and Putin smiling and joking, for America, they'll worry what this actually signifies, whether it actually signifies Washington's influence fading. Let's get you all of the latest updates, including the reactions that have come in from America in the last 24 hours in this report.
The Troika tango in Tianjin clearly shook Washington. Just hours after Prime Minister Narendra Modi stood shoulder to shoulder with Xi and Putin at the SCO summit, the Trump camp hit panic mode. On Truth Social, US President Donald Trump fumed, calling US-India trade a one-sided disaster. He claimed India offered to drop tariffs but shrugged it off as too late. Just like his past unproven claims of brokering peace between India and Pakistan, the bluster was back. Then came the double punch. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent took the criticism further, branding India and China as bad actors and accusing both nations of indirectly fueling Russia's war in Ukraine. Yet, in a mixed message, he also noted that Trump and Modi shared a strong personal bond, hinting at a possible reconciliation between the world's largest democracy and largest economy. And Trump's aide Peter Navarro, well, he didn't hold back either. The White House official slammed Modi's meeting with Putin and Xi as a shame, clearly rattled by India's unapologetic diplomacy.
It was a shame to see Modi getting in bed as the leader of the biggest democracy in the world with the two biggest authoritarian dictators in the world, in Putin and Xi Jinping. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure what he's thinking, particularly since India has been in a Cold War and sometimes a hot war with China for decades.
But New Delhi isn't flinching. From trade to ties with Moscow, India's message is clear. We will act in our national interest on our own terms. Bureau Report, India Today.
So why is it that you're seeing these kind of reactions coming in from Trump and his team? What is it about the Russia-India-China axis that's got Washington concerned? We'll break that down for you. There are a number of reasons for that. First is, of course, the tariffs, or as has become clear now, sanctions are being undermined. India, China are buying Russian crude. America has issued repeated warnings, including, of course, the tariff on India. But the fact that you've still got these kind of photo ops means that the US sanctions simply haven't worked, that there's no rattling as America expected of India as a result of that tariff. Second is the dollar dilemma. What do we mean by that? Well, the fact that you're seeing non-dollar trade happening and that these new corridors of trade challenge the US currency. Trump has spoken about this before, and that's what he went on to justify his BRICS crackdown over. Then this other concern for Washington is resource control. The RIC, Russia, India, China axis, is big in the sense that it holds 1/3 of global GDP and about $4.7 trillion of reserves. That's a huge concern for Washington, because just imagine among them itself how much power they can hold. There's also the issue of America having this entire narrative of a unipolar order that could be challenged if Russia, India, China actually move forward from just beyond the Tianjin photo op. It pushes that shift into a multipolar world. And the other concern is the economic might, because together this axis controls about $5 trillion in exports. And that's a big concern for America. What are we talking about as far as numbers, as far as people-to-people ties, population power is concerned? 3.1 billion people just between Russia, India, and China. That's about 38% of the global population. Huge, huge number there. Let me open this up to our panelists joining us tonight on India. First, we have Mr. Ashok Sajjanar, former Indian diplomat. Sushant Sareen, senior fellow at the ORF and strategic affairs expert, is with us. We have Dr. Arvind Yellary, associate professor of the Center for East Asian Studies and School of International Studies at JNU. We'll be joined also by Daniel Silverberg shortly. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Sushant Sareen, opening comments from you on what we saw really from Trump, the rant that he resorted to in his post last night. The tone of it seemed almost defensive, Sushant, kind of justifying his decision of imposing tariffs. Do you think he's feeling the heat domestically and hence forced to justify why he did what he did?
Yeah, look, in terms of the heat, he might be feeling the fact remains that a lot of people within the Trump camp have been looking askance at his policy towards India. And clearly, some of it has started hurting him, and which is why he's been forced to respond and justify what he's doing. Now, his justification was kind of incoherent because it didn't make any sense. The deal which India had offered, which is much before he imposed these tariffs on us, was that on a range of commodities, we were ready to go in for zero tariffs. But we had certain red lines, which we expected the Americans to respect and understand that these were not things that were possible for any government in India to do. And maybe if at all it was possible, then it would be in a graded manner. But look, let's be very clear about a couple of things. All the numbers, Akshita, that you have been giving right now in your opening statement, they're all valid. But look at the other side of the picture. The bottom line remains that the Western economies, the United States and Europe together, control more than half the global economy. They constitute the biggest markets in the world. Everybody wants that market. They control the global financial system largely. So to think that, just because a certain realignment is going to take place, and it's very, very premature to say that a realignment is taking place. I would imagine that there is a pushback taking place. There is a kind of a rebalancing taking place.
Sure.
But I don't think it's quite realignment. So I think we need to be careful when we say, okay, fine, if the Americans are going to play this kind of a game, the world can do without America. Eventually, yes, but not for now. And finally, on the whole issue of the currency, I think the latest reports are that a lot of people are moving, or a lot of countries are moving away from the dollar. The dollar's dominance has reduced over the years. Gold is again finding takers. There are other currencies that people are, trading in. So the dollar domination will further go down, not because somebody wants it, but because the Americans are pushing other countries into that direction. But that's not going to happen now. It'll take a long time for that to happen. And can then China, as the largest economy after the United States, rise up to the occasion and say, okay, fine, we will play the role which the Americans played maybe 80, 100 years back. We will play that role. We will provide the markets. Can they rise up to that occasion? I'm not sure of that. So too many uncertainties right now.
What do you think, Ambassador Sajna? Do you agree with Sushant Sareen that, we're kind of jumping the gun here? We can't afford to, that the West is still a big, formidable force. And look, for the RIC, what we've seen so far is optics. There are still a lot of challenges vis-a-vis India and China.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Akshita. Yes, it is optics, and optics are important. And so that is, I think the whole idea was to send out a very clear message to the United States, to Mr. Trump, that when Prime Minister Modi went for this meeting in Tianjin.
Okay. Ambassador Sajna, just give us a moment. We're having a bit of a problem there with your video. So I'm going to come back to you and give you an opportunity to answer that question in greater detail when we've fixed that connection. Let me bring in Dr. Arvind as well on this broadcast. Dr. Arvind, that same question to you. That are we reading too much into the optics here? Is it meant to just be a message to Trump? But beyond that, you can't really give much weightage to that Tianjin photo op.
Well, I think one has to look at the disruptions. It is the US and the Western-led economy, the global economy. If it controls the maximum number of resources, finances of the global economy, why did it feel to disrupt it? I mean, I completely disagree with Peter Navarro's statement, that, PM Modi should be, feeling shameful of meeting the two authoritarian in Tianjin. The way Trump is acting, he is trying to move kitchen out of the house. I mean, that looks absolutely idiotic. In the present circumstances, when the volatilities have been kicked off since global financial crisis, and that started with the big rich economies. I mean, instead of accommodating, giving, looking for more symmetries and equilateral relations, US is acting a bit weird, and it tries to control the maximum resources. That looks pretty authoritarian to me. If I go with the technical definition of authoritarian, so I think it is the Trump who feels it can threaten India, and if India for all practical reasons for time being aligns with Russia and China for the time being, it sends jitters to US and Trump. To me, it looks like zero-sum game for Trump. It is him who did this, and he's finding all the reasons to cry about it.
Let me also introduce on this broadcast Daniel Silverberg, who is a former Pentagon and Capitol Hill official. Daniel, thank you for joining us here on India Today. Do you think, Daniel, that the biggest challenge for Trump in justifying the tariff has been the mixed messaging? The question that his team is literally always confronted with, I've seen in all of the White House briefings, is that gentle treatment with Russia, gentle treatment with China, but rough treatment of India.
I actually don't think that is a primary concern for the Trump administration. I think the Trump administration has different equities with each country. In the case of China, for example, I'm confident the Trump administration is trying to reach a grand bargain with them. And for that reason, President Trump does not want to pick the fight with China that he is currently picking with India. What I think is actually most on the minds of the Trump administration is actually not turbulence with India per se, but rather the congressional midterms. It's important to remember that so much of what this administration is doing right now is with an eye towards what will be the electoral fortunes of Republican candidates in November. And whereas a couple of months ago, President Trump had basically written off Republicans winning the midterms. They're razor-thin margins. Typically, in a midterm election, the party that is not in control of the White House wins. Well, suddenly, we got polling a few weeks ago indicating that, hold on, Republicans actually could win those midterms. And so a lot of what we see President Trump doing right now is with an eye towards what will play well with Republican audiences, whether that is deploying National Guardsmen to DC and Chicago, or potentially picking a fight with India. What I might posit is that this is something that could potentially hurt Republicans, namely, Indian Americans are a significant constituency. They are not thrilled seeing the personal enmity coming to bear right now between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi.
So do you then, Daniel, and you're talking about how perhaps Trump is feeling the heat domestically. In such a circumstance, do you see attempts of damage control or attempts of justification?
It's on any given day, I think it's challenging to read what this president will do. And if I were counseling Indian counterparts, I would say, take a breath here and don't get too deep into reconciliation with Russia or China. This president can blow cold and then the next second be inviting Prime Minister Modi to the White House and repair relationships. It's the double-edged sword of how President Trump conducts diplomacy. However, I don't expect this administration to be taking any immediate steps, given the signaling that we're seeing from Peter Navarro and others, to try and repair this relationship. I don't think they feel the domestic political heat just yet. However, you got to recognize that in the Trump administration, there are 4 or 5 voices competing with each other at any given moment. And I guarantee you that the national security hawks, the anti-China constituency in the White House, are deeply concerned about this, as are numerous leaders on Capitol Hill. The last thing we want to see is President Xi and Prime Minister Modi forging tighter relationships at the exact time the United States needs India as its key partner in combating Chinese military and economic influence.
But that's why I asked the question. Ambassador Sajjanar is back with us. Ambassador Sajjanar, that's why I asked the question about whether, in some sense, Trump's strategy has backfired. Look, Daniel says that he knows exactly what he's doing as far as India, China, Russia goes, and why he's cracking down on India, not so much on Russia and China. But has Trump's strategy backfired in the sense that, look, he would have ideally wanted Russia to be isolated, and that's why he's been pushing for, of course, a ceasefire also. He's been wanting and pushing for isolation of China. None of that has happened.
No, absolutely. I think as far as Russia is concerned, he would have wanted that, he would have some semblance of peace with Ukraine. That has not happened. And I think, on the contrary, the conflict on the Russia-Ukraine side has really grown much worse. Before Trump came, I think everyone was thinking it has reached a stalemate, and maybe once it is a stalemate, it'll be a frozen conflict or something of that sort. But it is going to peter down. But what you see today, yesterday, and what Mr. Putin is doing, he is going all guns blazing at not only Kiev, not only Sumy, but also Odessa, which has been out of action for some time. But coming back to this, if the idea was that Mr. Trump needs India the most at this moment, this is not the way to, court India, by imposing all these sanctions. Because if Mr. Trump had thought that, by these coercive measures, by this pressure tactics, India is going to buckle, I think India's history should have told him. And, we have survived from 1947 to 1991 without the United States. Even in 1998, we faced the harshest of sanctions. 1971, we saw the USS Enterprise coming into the Bay of Bengal. So, this is not the way to court. This is not the way to get India on your side. So, and I think Mr. Trump is being told exactly that. Let me make 2 points very clear quickly,
sure.
Akshita, if I may.
Sure.
One is that, as far as the images coming out of Tianjin, they are basically, at this moment, for tactical purposes. And I think the messaging, what was intended, has gone. India and China have huge problems. It is not that these photos and this meeting, in Tianjin is going to sort it out. As far as India and Russia, there are limitations to what we can do. Defense is one, energy is another. But beyond that, what we are looking at in terms of markets, in terms of technology, where do you have your diaspora? Diaspora is there. Where do you get, and even as far as the United States is concerned, for them also, this is the market. The point that I would like to make to the gentleman, Mr. from the United States.
Yep, Daniel.
Is
Yep.
That is Mr. Trump, because in the first term, Trump was the only first US president who identified China as a strategic competitor, which has the will, intention, and capability to challenge the United States. That has not come down. In fact, that has gone up. So is the United States willing to give up its position to China?
Many
Because
would argue that currently the
yeah.
scenario, the situation perhaps benefits China the most. But Sushant, just to also add on to the point that you made earlier about whether we're reading too much into the optics, whether we can afford to right now, it is easy, and I understand why, to dismiss the SCO because, the bloc essentially is full of contradictions. India, Pakistan remain adversaries. China and India aren't fully trusting of each other as well.
No, that's true. And I don't think it can be anybody's case that the SCO is a replacement or the precursor of a new global order, which will be, arraigned against the West. I don't think so. Nor I would imagine is India going to be interested in that. I would certainly think that the events of the last 3 months or so are not going to be forgotten easily in India. There's a sense of betrayal. There's a sense that the Americans have treated us unfairly. There's no justification for it. And, it'll be difficult unless India was like a Pakistan that a military dictator calls all the shots. It's difficult for a political government to simply turn around and say, okay, fine, Donald Trump and I are going to be best of friends. I think that train has left the station. The simple fact of the matter is that if there is a thaw between India and China, and I suspect that both sides think that there is a certain opportunity that they can try and explore the possibility of addressing some of those problems that Ambassador Sajjanhar is talking about, including, of course, the mother of all problems, which is the boundary issue. Can we move forward on that and try and sort that out? Now, even if that would happen, India is not going to want to turn its back on the West, far from it. But I suppose that India will also not be inclined to becoming a part of a Western plan to probably push the Chinese against the wall. Because now the dilemma for us is going to be, even if Trump was to wake up tomorrow and say, I want to hug Modi again, and he might well do that, the thing is that Modi will continue to also hold hands with Xi Jinping. He is not going to say, okay, fine, now I'm going back to Trump, Xi Jinping can go to hell. And the second thing, Akshita, which is kind of crazy, because I would have always thought that America, being a hyperpower, would have some kind of strategic foresight. They first pushed the Russians into the Chinese arms, okay? By provoking them in Ukraine, and then Russia fights a war and then double down against Russia and push him further into the Chinese arms. Then they target us to get even with Russia. They target us and start pushing us towards China. Now, if this is the strategy for China containment among all those geniuses from all those fancy Ivy League universities in the United States, then God help the US. Because it doesn't make any sense to me. And forget us. They are alienating their allies and their friends in Europe. They are bullying them. They're bullying the Japs. They're bullying the Koreans. They're bullying everybody. Everybody who's their friend is in their crosshairs. Everybody who's an adversary, whether it is Xi Jinping, with whom they want to try and enter into a grand bargain, whether it is anybody else, they're nice to them. I can't make sense of this policy. Maybe Daniel can, and I would be very interested to know what he thinks is the great genius.
I think Daniel began his opening statement by saying, look, nobody can really understand or predict what Trump does. But gentlemen, I request you to stay with me, because one of the questions that constantly arises is what next? We've got a reaction, in fact, from Union Minister Piyush Goyal. Let's get you that newsbreaker also that's coming in. Piyush Goyal has now expressed hope that India will, in fact, conclude a proposed bilateral trade agreement with America by November, in a few months from now. So Piyush Goyal has said, and I'm quoting here, a little bit of geopolitical issues overtook trade matters in the negotiations for the pact between the two countries. He has reiterated that yes, there's a conversation that's currently underway. Communication channels are still very much open, which is good to know. So far, 5 rounds of talks have been completed. Remember that there was a US team that was scheduled to visit India to hold the next round of talks, but that didn't happen. That visit was deferred indefinitely. We don't know when it's going to happen at this point. No new dates have been finalized for the 6th round of negotiations, but Piyush Goyal expressing hope that it could happen, that we could see some sort of an agreement in few months from now. Aishwarya Paliwal is joining us with more details on this. Aishwarya, take us through really what Mr. Goyal has said right now.
Well, Akshita, it's very, very important to point out that the Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal very clearly has expressed hope that we will be able to conclude the proposed bilateral trade agreement, which is the BTA. We are now looking at fall or November this year. See, things have moved, beyond what India was expecting, because we have seen hard stands being taken both by India as well as the United States of America. But Akshita, government very, very clear. Even if it does not happen in November, we will give it more time, because there are certain areas that India will not be opening up to the United States or to anyone across the globe. That's something that government has made very, very clear. There's a bit of a geopolitical issue. It overtook the trade matters in the negotiations that were taking place. Let's hope that this BTA, that is the bilateral trade agreement, could be fruitful by fall or by November this year.
Thank you for that update. I'll take this back across to our panelists. Daniel, the big question that constantly comes up is that have we reached a point of no return as far as the India-America story goes? Can the damage that Trump has done actually be undone now? Because there are a couple of aspects to this. Look, even if, let's say, Trump invites Prime Minister Modi to the White House tomorrow and suggests that they hug it out, there are a couple of issues here. One is that there is a trust deficit now. India is always going to be wary on whether they can 100% trust Trump. And secondly, domestic pressures as well matter in India.
Well, a couple of points here. First, I think it's critical for Indians to recognize the U.S.-India relationship is not just about President Trump. It's not just about who is in the White House. It is far deeper than that. Where I worked for 14 years on Capitol Hill, we spent a lot of time trying to support whatever the White House, whoever the president was, in strengthening the U.S.-India relationship. And those efforts continue despite whatever President Trump and his team might be doing on any given day. That's first. Second, I think it's important to view the long-term picture here. It's not just about the immediate turbulence with President Trump. Both sides see tremendous strategic needs and opportunities with each other. I think it's critical amidst this kind of turbulence to focus on those aspects and to keep a long-term picture. 3, and as a Washington analyst, I think this is really critical for Indian audiences to understand. U.S. politics plays a key role here. President Trump is acting not necessarily out of what might make the most sense for the United States foreign policy interests. And I can tell you, as someone who has worked for years trying to strengthen the U.S.-India relationship, this is utterly painful to watch. However, he is not looking at this solely through a lens of what's good for U.S. foreign policy. He is very much looking at these kinds of actions through what does this mean for U.S. domestic politics? And that's why I mentioned the midterms, because you have to understand, in order to calculate what President Trump is doing on any given day, you have to understand the Republican viewpoint on potential wins in the midterms. If President Trump starts to feel the heat from the Indian American community, from others, that this volatility with India is not scoring him points, is actually yielding wins for China, then we can see President Trump try and walk this back. Whether India is ready to reconcile, I will leave that for other experts to opine. But I can tell you, don't think this is just about President Trump. The relationship with India is far deeper than whatever the White House is doing on any given day.
Okay, so then I'll reword that and say, can India ever trust Trump? It comes down to that. Look, there are a few more years of his presidency, so the reality is that we have to continue dealing with Donald Trump. And so there's a question mark of what it really means for the India-America story, at least in the coming few years. I'll just put the focus again on what Donald Trump said last night and bring in Dr. Arvind on that. Would you, Dr. Arvind, refer to India-US ties as one-sided trade ties, as Trump calls it?
Absolutely no, because trade ties have been in development for decades, and I think it is not something we just devised it overnight. So as a result of it, it is just very generic the way the trade ties have developed. But I think let me go back to one point which Daniel raised, that the ties are deeper. We cannot just look from the optics what Trump is doing. But Trump has backed in the second term. In the last 10 years, the US policies towards India has been inconsistent. It is not only Trump. It is not only about the Republicans. The entire domestic politics within the US looks pretty inconsistent to deal with India, to appease India, to take India on board. So I think that is going to set a new goal for the Indian foreign policy makers, diplomats, and everyone who is looking at US. And to me, frankly, it looks like even if there is a Bahami or maybe a rapprochement takes place between the Indian and American leaders, there is going to be more anxiousness within the Indian political leaders, businessmen, whether to trust US again, and how much to believe in the words Trump is going to throw at us again.
Ambassador Sajanar, you see what's happening right now, and my sense is that the one country that perhaps is smiling through all of this is China. They stand to benefit through all of this because, not just did you have all of the symbolic messaging happening in Tianjin, all of the photo ops, the smiles, you have a military parade tomorrow where you have all of these leaders coming together, and then Trump seemingly also pushing countries towards their side.
No, absolutely. You're very right. I think as far as China is concerned, Mr. Xi Jinping is concerned, I think his only objective was basically to project to India that the only game in town is Trump tariffs. So, we have to get together to deal with Trump tariffs and, try to drive a wedge between, create, a sour relationship between India and the United States. Now, let me tell Mr. Goldberg also that, in India, you don't have to tell us. We realize what is good for us, what is in our interest. And that is why you would see, notwithstanding all these despicable, venomous, obnoxious words coming from Washington, D.C., you don't have an Indian version of Peter Navarro. You don't have an Indian version of Scott Bissett. We have been very dignified. We have been very restrained. The only thing that has come out of Delhi is that these tariffs are unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable, because India recognizes that it is an important relationship. And so we don't want to we realize that what Mr. Trump is doing is not what America wants. But he's, as Akshita, you said, Trump is going to be for 3.5 years. That's going to be a long time. And, if you see, we keep the big picture, but you look at the gems and jewelry people who are going to lose their jobs. You look at the shrimps producers who are going to lose their jobs. You look at the textile and garment producers who are going to lose their jobs. They are not going to come back after 3.5 years and say, okay, we go ahead. I was in Washington when we were negotiating the next steps to strategic partnership, the US-India nuclear deal. Always the question was, can the United States be trusted? And that is why, it was very snail slow pace steps that you had to reassure yourself. 1971 was long ago, but still that memory lingered. And right now also, for you to say that Mr. Trump will call Mr. Modi, give him a hug, and everything is forgotten. It is not so simple. It is not so simple as far as Indian people are concerned, as far as Indian leadership is concerned. And I think it'll be good for Washington also to recognize that, the sort of damage that is being done in terms of the trust deficit. The last point, Akshita, that I'll make here is, when you see us talking to China, please realize it is a strategic necessity for us. No other country has a 3,500 kilometer long border with China that is undemarcated, that is not settled. And they've been coming on through salami slicing. So I want peace, I want tranquility, because I want my focus to be on development. I want to make the country develop by 2047. So it's a strategic necessity for me to have peaceful relations and to have a working normal relationship with China. Similarly with Russia, the United States during the Cold War years did not supply any of the weaponry to us. We are dependent on them. Earlier it used to be 75%. Today it is 40%. But still our major platforms are coming from there. You must realize that our imports of defense from the US has risen greatly in recent years. But, we have to make progress in that direction. Don't think that it'll flip overnight.
Okay. Daniel, just quickly also from you on what Ambassador Sajanar has said. Look, there has been a silence from India in the face of almost every 24 hours, these kind of comments that have come in either from Trump or from Navarro or from someone in Team Trump. But I think very clearly India has taken a position of a studied silence on this particular issue, saying we're not going to respond to every one of these comments. The concern here, and when I say that we've reached perhaps a point of no return, is that what Trump has done is kind of all of the efforts that have been made by India and America, by both countries to build and cement these ties, has been shredded now with what he's done in the last few weeks. That he's inevitably pushed India closer to Russia. He's inevitably also pushed India into considering getting closer to China.
Well, as the ambassador said, far be it from anyone in Washington to counsel the Indian government on what's in their best interest. I think the Indian government knows where its future lies and what its best interests are. What I would point out, and by the way, I would just posit, I do think the Indian government recognizes that its long-term interests rest with the United States, not with China, notwithstanding the immediate turbulence. I would point out, though, that with any conflict, there's agency on both sides. And in this instance, the White House has expressed serious concern consistently about India's purchase of Russian oil. And I think the Indian government is going to, as part of any right-sizing this relationship, getting it back on track, is going to have to come up in cooperation with the United States, a way to address the Russian oil purchases. The one thing I would counsel, and I praise the Indian government for its somewhat measured approach to date, the one thing I would counsel is not to get swept up in the immediate turbulence and make decisions or calculations about the long-term relationship here based on what's happening right now. I very much hear the question of, will the Indians be able to trust the United States again? That's obviously a question for the Indian government to determine, but my counsel would be, don't make any immediate judgments right now. Look at where the long-term strategic interests lie. And in my view, the long-term interests for India, like the United States, rest together rather than with China.
Okay, so the suggestion then is to kind of differentiate between Trump and America. But is that actually possible? Is actually the question now, looking at the fact that you're seeing Trump as president for the next few years and with all the unpredictability that he brings along. But that's all we have time for this discussion. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and for joining us here on India Fest. But even as we talk about what's been happening as far as Trump's tariff tyranny, as it's being referred to, has been happening, let's also look at another aspect between India and US. After the tariff, the 50% tariff, and fuming, of course, over the Modi-Putin-Xi show of unity in Tianjin, the US has now shut the door on easy visa. So there'll be no more dropbox, no more age waivers. This at a time when tourism in America is being hit due to the restrictions imposed by the Trump administration.
Big change for Indian visa applicants from today. The United States has ended the dropbox facility and age-based exemptions that allowed many to skip consulate interviews. That means students on F1 visas, professionals on H1B, and L1 work visas, and even tourists and business travelers on B1 and B2 visas all must now face an in-person interview. The previous age-based relaxations, where those below 14 and above 79 often got automatic clearance, are also gone. This shift comes amid rising numbers until recently. In 2024, more than 22 lakh Indians visited the United States, a 24% increase over the previous year, making India the second largest overseas tourist market for America. But the picture is shifting. As per the US National Travel and Tourism Office, tourism to the US fell nearly 3% in the January to June period this year. Student arrivals in the 6 months to June plunged 12.9%. It was only business travel which saw an increase.
I think H-1B, when you look at it, almost 70% of the H-1B goes to Indians itself. But most of them are sponsored by US companies, such companies such as Google, Microsoft, Meta, and others. You have to understand that they are on a lottery-based system. So that means the Indians who go there, they get an average salary of $66,000 on the H-1B. And when you look at from a broader perspective, the median income in the US is around $75,000. The reform is going to focus more on the capability, qualification, and the compensation. And between the two, you get point system, and then you qualify for H-1B. So I think it works in favor of Indians who are looking at leveraging H-1B, that they will get higher salaries, and more qualified people will be able to get access rather than just waiting through the lottery system, where qualified people will not be able to make it.
This dramatic decline in visa issuance reflects a broader US immigration crackdown, now making today's removal of dropbox and age waivers the latest blow. Recent actions include tougher scrutiny of H-1B petitions, including social media posts, delays in student visas, border enforcement, and today's rule tightening across the board. Together, these measures reflect a political climate wary of foreign workers and migrants, even as US universities and tech companies depend heavily on Indian talent. So what happens next? Expect longer wait times for interviews, especially in cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Hyderabad. Travel plans may need more advanced planning, and costs for applicants will go up, as well as higher visa rejections. For Indian families, professionals, and students, the dream of America just got a little harder to reach. From today, face-to-face scrutiny is the new normal for nearly all US visa hopefuls. The era of easy renewals is officially over. And as Washington tightens its gates, the world's largest pool of visa seekers in India will be watching closely how the rules play out in practice. Bureau Report, Business Today TV.
Take a look at one of those images that went viral at the SCO summit. This is Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif once again having a headphone fumble at the SCO summit. He struggled to fix his earpiece while trying to follow the proceedings. And the cameras caught Russian President Vladimir Putin kind of chuckling at the moment and then instructing Shehbaz Sharif on exactly how to wear the headphone.
Mr. Prime Minister.
Let's get to the big political story of the day. From slogans to slurs, the battle for Bihar has taken an unfortunate bitter turn. Prime Minister Modi today turned rather emotional while reacting to a viral video where his late mother was abused during a Congress yatra. Calling it painful and saying it's an insult to every mother in India, the Prime Minister hit out at the opposition and the political fight ahead of election, shifting from governance, unfortunately, to galis.
गाली, बद्दी गाली केवल मेरी मां को नहीं दी गई है, ये भद्दी भद्दी गाली करोड़ों माताओं बहनों को दी गई है।
Politics gets personal. Prime Minister Narendra Modi broke his silence on the viral Gali video from Bihar.
कुछ समय पहले 100 साल की उम्र पूरी करके वो हम सबको छोड़ के चली गई। मेरी उस मां को, जिसका राजनीति से कोई लेना देना नहीं, जिसका शरीर भी अब नहीं है, मेरी उस मां को आरजेडी कांग्रेस के मंच से भद्दी भद्दी गालियां दी गई।
Calling it painful, the Prime Minister added that his mother was not in politics. Still, the opposition targeted his mother for political mileage and claimed Bihar will not tolerate the insult.
आरजेडी का अत्याचार नहीं सहेंगे, नहीं सहेंगे। कांग्रेस का वार नहीं सहेंगे, नहीं सहेंगे। मां का अपमान नहीं सहेंगे, नहीं सहेंगे।
The controversy erupted after a viral clip from the Congress's voter Adhikar Yatra in Darbhanga, where a party worker abused the Prime Minister and his dead mother. He has since been arrested. Modi hit back hard, targeting Rahul Gandhi and Tejashwi Yadav.
एक गरीब मां की तपस्या, उसके बेटे की पीड़ा, ये शाही खानदानों में पैदा हुए युवराज नहीं समझ सकते। ये नामदार लोग तो सोने चांदी का चम्मच लेकर पैदा हुए हैं।
The Congress and RJD distanced themselves from the controversy, alleging conspiracy and propaganda by BJP.
मंच पर श्री राहुल गांधी जी, श्री तेजस्वी यादव जी गए ही नहीं, तो फिर उस मंच को किसने बनाया, किस साजिश के तहत बनवाया गया, क्यों इस तरह का फेक प्रोपगंडा खड़ा किया गया है?
This toolkit does not work again and again. No leader or worker of any political party, be it the BJP, be it any other party, or Congress of course, will ever insult anybody's mother.
The NDA slammed the mindset of the opposition.
जो मानसिकता इस प्रकार की शब्दावली का प्रयोग करती है, जिस प्रकार से आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी की माता जी को लेकर के किया गया, वो वास्तव में उस मानसिकता की झलक है जिसने 50-60 बरस इस मुल्क पर हुकूमत की शासन किया।
भाई, देश के प्रधानमंत्री किसी दल के नहीं होते, देश के होते हैं। तो देश के प्रधानमंत्री की मां के बारे में आपत्तिजनक टिप्पणी किया जाना और उसका राहुल गांधी और महागठबंधन के घटक दल द्वारा निंदा तक नहीं किया जाना, पार्टी के स्तर पर कोई कार्रवाई नहीं किया जाना, यह तो अपमान की एक नई राजनीति शुरू हो गई।
But the political slugfest has only intensified. Moving from governance and development, Bihar's battle is now over abuse and name-calling. Bureau Report, India Today.
And that right there is the reality of Indian politics. This is what the political discourse has been dragged down to. That's all we have time for in this edition of India First. Thanks very much for tuning in.